Chapter 19. Goblins' Council. He must have slept a long while, for when he woke he felt very wonderfully restored, almost well indeed, and very hungry. There were voices in the outer cave. Once more then it was night, for the goblins slept during the day and went about all their affairs during the night. In the universal and constant darkness of their dwelling, they had no reason to prefer one arrangement to the other, but from an aversion to the sun people, they chose to be busy when they had least chance of being met either by miners below, when they were burrowing, or by the people of the mountain above, when they were feeding their sheep or catching goats. And indeed, it was only when the sun was away that the outside of the mountain was sufficiently like their own dismal region that their mole eyes could endure it. So thoroughly had they become accustomed to the light only of their own fires and torches. Curdie listened, and soon found that they were talking of himself.
"How long will it be?"
asked Harelip. "Not many days, I should think," answered the king. "They are poor, feeble creatures, those sun people, wanting always to be eating. We can go for a week at a time without food, and be all the better for it. But I'm told they eat 2 or even 3 times a day. Can you believe it? They must be quite hollow inside, unlike us, 9/10 of whose bulk is solid flesh and bone. Yes, I judge a week of starvation will do for them." "If I may be allowed a word," interposed the Queen, "and I think I ought to be allowed to have some voice in the matter." "The wretch is entirely at your disposal, my spouse," responded the king. "He is your property. You caught him yourself. We never should have done it." The Queen laughed. She seemed in far better spirits than she had the night before. "I was about to say," she resumed, "it does seem a pity to waste so much fresh meat." "What are you talking of, my love?" said the king. "The very notion of starving him implies that we are not going to give him any meat, either salted or fresh." "I am not such a stupid as that comes to," returned Her Majesty. "What I mean is that by the time he is starved, there will be hardly any pickings on his bones." The king gave a great laugh. "Well, my spouse, you may have him when you like," he said. "I don't fancy him for my part. I'm pretty sure he is tough eating." "It would be honour indeed instead of punishment for his insolence," returned the Queen. "But why should our poor creatures be deprived of such nourishment? Our little dogs and cats and pigs and small bears would enjoy him very much." "You are the best of housekeepers, my lovely Queen," said her husband. "Let us by all means. Let us have our people come in, get him out, and kill him at once. He deserves it. The mischief he might have brought upon us. Now, had he been able to penetrate so far as our most retired citadel, it is incalculable. Or rather, let us tie him up hand and foot, and have the pleasure of seeing him torn to pieces by full candlelight in the great hall." "Better and better," cried the Queen and the Prince together, and both of them were clapping their hands. The Prince made an ugly noise, just as if he intended to be one at the feast. "But," added the Queen, bethinking herself, "he is so troublesome. Poor creatures that they are, there is something about those sun people that is very troublesome. I cannot imagine how it is that with such superior strength and skill and understanding as ours, we permit them to exist at all. Why should we not destroy them entirely, and use their cattle and grazing land at our pleasure? Of course, we do not want to live in their horrid country, far too glaring for our quiet and more sophisticated tastes. But we could use it as a sort of outhouse, you know. Even our creatures' eyes might get used to it, and if they did go blind, or that to be of no consequence, provided they grew fat as well. But we might take some of their great cows and
other creatures.
Then we could afford a few more luxuries, such as cream and cheese, which at present we only taste occasionally when our brave men have succeeded in carrying some off from their farms. It is worth thinking of, said the king, and I don't know why you should be the first to suggest it, except that you have a positive genius for conquest. But still, as you say, there's something very troublesome about them. And it would be better, as I understand from your suggestion, if we maybe were to starve him for a day or two first, so that he be a little bit less frisky when we take him out. Once there was a goblin living in a hole. Busy was a goblin, a shoe without a sole. By there came a birdie, goblin, what you do? Goblin at a struddy, up a leather shoe. What's the good of that, sir? Said the little bird. Why, it's very pat, sir, plain without a word. Were it all a hole, sir, neither with a holes. Why, shoes should have their soles, sir, when we got no soles. What is that horrid noise? Cried the queen, shuddering from her pot metal head to her granite shoes. I declare, said the king with solemn indignation, it is the sun creature in the hole. Stop that disgusting noise, cried the crown prince, standing in front of the hole with his face towards Curdie's prison.
Do it now, or I'll break your head.
Break away, shouted Curdie, and began to sing again. Once there was a goblin living in a hole. I really cannot bear it, said the queen.
If I could only get at his horrid toes with my slippers again.
I think we had better go to bed, said the king.
It is not time to go to bed, said the queen.
I would if I were you, said Curdie.
Impudent wretch,
said the queen with the utmost scorn in her voice. An impossible if, said his majesty with dignity. Quite, returned Curdie, and began to sing again. Go to bed, goblin, do, help the queen take off her shoe. If you do, it will disclose a horrid set of sprouting toes.
What lies, said the queen with rage.
By the way, that reminds me, said the king, for as long as we have been married, I don't think I've ever seen your feet, queen. I do think you might take off your shoes when you go to bed. They positively hurt me sometimes.
I will do as I like, said the queen sulkily.
You ought to do as your hubby wishes you, said the king.
I will not, said the queen.
Then I insist upon it, said the king. Apparently his majesty approached the queen for this purpose, for following the advice of Curdie, and the latter hearing a scuffle and a great roar from the king.
Will you be quiet,
then, said the queen. Yes, queen, I only meant to coax you.
Hands off, cried the queen triumphantly. I am going to bed. You may come when you like, but for as long as I am queen, I shall sleep in my shoes. It is my royal privilege. Harelip, go to bed. I'm going, said Harelip, a little bit sleepily.
So am I, said the king.
Come along then, said the queen, and mind your good, or I'll...
Oh, no, cried the queen in a most supplicating tone. Curdie only heard a muffled reply in the distance, and then the cave was quite still. They had left the fire burning, and the light came through brighter than before. Curdie thought it was time to try again to see if there was anything that could be done. But he found he could not even get a finger through the chink between the slab and the rocks. He gave a great rush at it with his shoulder, but it was no more yielding than as if the slab had been part of the rock. All he could do was sit and think. By and by, he came to the resolution to pretend to be dying, in the hope that they might take him out before his strength was too much exhausted to give him at least a chance. Then, for the creatures, if he could only but find his axe again, he would have no fear of them, and if it were not for the queen's horrid shoes, he should have no fear at all. Meanwhile, until they should come again at night, There was nothing more for him to do but forge new rhymes, now his only weapon. He had no intention of using them at present, of course, but it was well to have a good set in stock, for he might live to be in want of them, and the manufacturing of them would at least help him pass the time.